Thank you, Matthias. Good morning. It's amazing to see so many people up so early after last night. Thank you for joining us. So before we get started, a little bit about who we are, because you might have seen Worldpay around the last couple of days. We were very pleased to sponsor the opening party the night before last. But a lot of people don't really know who we are or what qualifies us to talk about the future of payments. So first of all, we are actually probably one of the biggest companies you have never heard of. We're the #1 international acquirer in the world. Okay, and that's payment speak. What the hell does that mean? That means that actually we process domestic card payments in more countries around the world than anybody else. We're also doing that at scale. So we process almost 32 million transactions a day, and more than $500 million worth of volume is passing through our systems. Actually, yesterday was a really exciting day for us. Does anybody know why yesterday was a big deal in e-commerce? It was China's Singles Day, which is, again, one of the biggest things you've never heard of. It's a shopping event, a little bit like Valentine's Day, that has kicked off in the last couple of years in China. And yesterday, Worldpay hit a new record, which was 963 transactions per second, which was a new record for us. It was quite incredible. We'd been preparing for it for weeks. The other thing that makes us a bit different, and we think interesting, is that we own the full value chain of payments. So most payment companies are either a gateway or a payment services provider. They do the front end but not the back end, or they're an acquirer. They do the back end and not the front end. We're quite unusual because we do both, and we have our own suite of fraud tools and treasury tools, and we have a network of 326 other payment types that we work with around the world, so that the merchants who are our partners can accept payment from any shopper anywhere in the world. It's quite a remarkable thing. That means, actually, that we're relevant for many of you because we are experts in helping companies go global and grow. And this is something where we really see a new normal over the last couple of years, that once upon a time, a startup would start in one country and grow to scale, refine their model. Then in year 2, they might go to a second country or a third country. And what we see now are startup business plans that say, by year 2, I need to be in 20 countries. So, we have a lot of experience in helping people go global. We also, we're a recent fintech success story. So you might have seen Worldpay's IPO just about a month ago on the London Stock Exchange, which was the biggest IPO on the LSE in several years, and the largest fintech IPO in UK history. So that's who we are. But let's pivot now to talk more about payments. So payments are blowing up. There's never been a more exciting time to work in payments. And what a change that is. I don't think anybody grew up, and actually maybe they still don't, saying, when I grow up, I want to work in payments. But it really has, over the last few years, gone from a space that was pretty moribund, dominated by banks, slow-moving, to one in which there is incredible rapid innovation and change. There are lots and lots of things that are driving that, and we could talk about that all day. And hopefully, actually, on the panel that follows this, we'll talk about all of this in more detail. But I thought I'd just introduce 3 ideas of the kinds of things that we're thinking about inside Worldpay when we're talking about the future of payments. And these are things that don't actually necessarily have answers today, but we think they're interesting questions, and where the direction of travel probably has multiple possible outcomes. And these are things that we should all be thinking about and aware of. So, there we go. Right. So, 3 ideas that I want to talk about today. Invisible payments, and I'll say more about what that means in a second. Decentralization or distributed ledgers. No future of payments presentation would be complete without mentioning blockchain. And then something kind of interesting about the role of identity and payments and how the two are intertwined. So first of all, invisible payments. What do I mean by invisible payments? Well, let me tell you a little bit of a story. So all of you, I'm sure, have a smartphone. And the amount of data that you're consuming through your smartphone is just soaring astronomically. We don't need to dwell on why that is or how it came about, but the interesting question is, well, what does that really mean for payments? And I'm sure many of you, if you're old enough, remember the first time you tried to buy something online on a BlackBerry. It was a horrible, horrible experience. So the advent of mobile phones and smartphones and payments kind of put merchants and payment providers on a mission to make the payment experience more seamless, to reduce what we call cart abandonment. The interesting thing about that, thinking about the future, is what's the logical extreme of it? The logical extreme of a seamless payment is one in which the payment actually disappears entirely. And that's what we're starting to see. My favorite example of it is actually Uber. If you think, and I'm sure there's no one in the room who hasn't used Uber, and if you haven't, I have a referral code for you. But if you think about the experience of using Uber, you open the app, you send for a car, the car confirms, you get in, you get to your destination, you get out. 2 transactions have just happened, and both of them were entirely invisible. So you paid Uber, and Uber paid the driver. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about invisible payments. And I think they're a brilliant thing. I love Uber. But there are interesting questions to think about what happens as that model becomes ubiquitous. And it raises some really interesting questions about how, as consumers, we'll continue to exercise some level of control over what we're spending and where we're spending it, and actually even an element of control over ourselves. If you think about when you were in university, one of the ways that you restrained yourself from spending too much money was probably by leaving your wallet at home and just taking cash when you went out. In an era of invisible payments, when actually all you have to do in order to spend money is say, I want that, and all of a sudden it's on its way to you, that raises some interesting questions about how it is we'll restrain ourselves and how it is that we'll exercise control. But let's take that one step further. You've heard a lot yesterday and today, and in fact, in the session before this one, about the Internet of Things or the Internet of Everything. But think about what that's going to mean for payment. So here's a handy graphic. The number of things that will be connected to the Internet will vastly outnumber the number of people on the planet very soon. What nobody's figured out yet, and we're all working on, is if you take that concept of invisible payments and payment ecosystems and then apply that to connected devices, and then, what the hell, let's roll in some element of artificial intelligence on there, those questions of control and restraint become even more interesting if we're talking about a network of smart devices that are somehow empowered to spend money on my behalf and act on my behalf. And we don't know yet how all of that is going to play out, but we think it's really interesting. The second thing I said I'd talk about, hold on, is this idea of decentralization and well, what everyone is kind of referring to as blockchain or distributed ledgers. And most of the conversation today about that is obviously about Bitcoin, but Bitcoin really, I think, is just the tip of the iceberg, actually. And what I don't think anyone has really figured out yet is what the real use cases for blockchain in payments actually are. So far, the most successful use cases seem to be about helping banks save money and reducing the cost of clearing. But I don't think we've yet really explored what all the use cases for this actually are within our world. And hopefully that's one of the topics that we can talk about a little bit later with some of our colleagues that are more involved in the blockchain world. Finally, the idea that I wanted to leave you with is one about identity and the way in which our identity and who we are is actually really becoming immersed and entangled or entwined with payment. And this has actually been around in some form or another for a long time. If you think about when you go to the airport, the easiest way that the kiosk identifies who you are is that you put in a card with a mag stripe, they get out. And all that is the airline using your payment data as a form of identity check. So we've done this for a long time, but it's starting to take on new levels. So this is an interesting example of something that we've been experimenting with at Worldpay, which is there's a company out there called Veridu. And what Veridu are doing is they are working to bring all of your social data together, your whole online footprint, and to bring in that into one place and use it as a tool to verify who you are for payment. And if you flip that around to the positive, it has some really interesting use cases for how a merchant might be able to use it in both the offline world and the online world to recognize who their consumers are, reward their loyalty, confirm their identity, and make sure they don't decline good transactions. But that also raises some interesting questions. Because actually, how much do I really want my barista at Starbucks to know about who I am and how I spend my time and how I spend my money? And actually, as biometrics become more entwined in payments, as we use biometrics to prove who we are, the reverse case becomes one of, well, what happens if my online identity, if my payment identity, which is linked to my biometrics, is in some way compromised? And again, how do I guard my privacy, and how do I protect my identity in a way in which I feel confident and safe about what's happening to me? So finally, just a little bit of advice for those of you in the room who have startups or are thinking about having a startup. You really do need to put payments actually at the heart of everything you do. And think not only about what you need for year one of your business plan, but what you're going to need for year 3. Because I can't tell you how many businesses we've worked with that made poor choices about the infrastructure that they set up at day 1 that might have been fit for purpose for the first 6, 9, 12, 18 months. But 2 to 3 years creates a really expensive headache when their businesses are already at scale. So thank you for your time. I look forward to the panel discussion afterwards. Thank you.